call this video my mid-build van tour, and the reason is because it's the middle of the summer in Las Vegas. We're going to escape, and I'm not going to be able to work on the van for maybe 5 or 6 weeks. So I wanted to give kind of a wrap-up of where I am so far, and then I'll be taking a break in these videos for a while before I continue to work on the van. During the next 5 or 6 weeks, I hope to get maybe some of the electrical finished. That would be good, but otherwise I won't be able to do much of anything else because I won't have any tools. But anyway, this video is designed to sort of acquaint you with how all the major components are going to fit. I wanted to put everything as much as possible in the van to just see what the space was, the headroom clearances, all this kind of stuff. And to get an idea of how it's going to actually behave on the road. I put the PV panel up, I put in the fridge, I put it in the sink, I put it in the stove, put it in the bed. So you'll be able to get a sense of what it looks like ultimately. Now, of course, I've got a lot of finish work to do. It's going to be much prettier than what you're going to see today. But nevertheless, one of the things I wanted to do was point out a few of the thorniest problems that I've had so far working with the ProMaster and essentially integrating all of the equipment that I've got. So in that sense, I'm doing it all for the first time myself, and I wish that I had been able to see these videos about a ProMaster City myself before I started this. So that's one of the main reasons why I'm making these videos. I don't proclaim to be a professional videographer, but if I can help people save some time and money, then I think that it's kind of payback for all of the good feedback I've gotten, from the community and all of the efforts that other people have put into their YouTube videos to show, the systems that work, the problems that they've had, etc. So I hope you enjoy this, and I will see you, after several weeks. Okay, we're going to start this video with looking at the roof rack. And with the roof rack, there were a couple of things that represented major problems. First, it's a big rack. Okay, this rack covers most of the roof, and that's because the PV panel is going to be large. It's 330 watts, and then I'm going to have a max air fan at the back. And you'll see that, including space for the water tubes, it hangs over the roof. Okay, the rack and all the equipment is actually bigger than the roof, so I have to figure out how to basically straddle the entire roof and support the whole system. Now, the first major problem was all of the placement of everything, just getting it exactly right. And the second major problem was really these U brackets that I'm showing here. The U brackets really needed to be custom fit to each mounting screw on the roof. Now you would think that this van is symmetrical, right? That the driver's side would be symmetrical to the passenger side. Not true. Okay, each one of these is custom built. Okay, they represent a different height in order to ultimately allow me to have a straight and level roof rack. So to get these various custom roof mounts, I created molds for each particular mount. Then I got a resin and a hardener, and I poured them together in the appropriate ratio in order to create a solid plastic block which would be exactly the right size. It would be the right elevation. It would have the right tilt to it as well as slope of the block, etc. And I thought this was going to work really well. Well, as it turned out, this was a complete disaster. I created each of these molds. Now, each one of these I thought was going to be leak proof and carefully labeled as to the exact location of each one. And I was pretty careful to make sure that it wouldn't leak, but as it turned out, every single one of these molds leaked. And besides that, the hardening agent, I don't know, I'm sure I followed the instructions, but the hardening agent did not create a hard mold. So this stuff ended up leaking all over the table. It was a complete disaster, and I didn't know what to do at that point. So this is what happened. All the resin and the hardener leaked out of this thing onto the table, and it was just a complete mess. So my next approach was to build up these mounts using pieces of tire, pieces of cut up tire and inner tube. So the idea was to use these tire pieces, which by the way were a real bitch to cut because this was a stainless steel radial tire. So cutting these pieces was no mean feat. But I was able to customize each one of these, roughly using the combination of inner tube and both thick tire pieces and thin tire pieces in order to create this tire mount. And then I injected silicone into all of the gaps, that I created under the mount. And then I wrapped it all. So I had a really solid, compact, silicone and rubber filled mount, which felt very solid. And I wrapped it all with duct tape in order to, well, first to keep the silicone from leaking out while it was hardening, and then I just left the duct tape on there for looks, I guess. So one thing I should say is that this whole roof rack is going to be wrapped with a skirt of siding, and it will hide all of this claptrap in the middle. So you won't see the water tubes there, you won't see the PV panel, you won't see the max air fan, and it will be sloped so that it'll be resistant to wind forces. I'm hesitant to put in the water tubes and the max air fan before I get that skirt configured because I just want to minimize the wind forces that I'm going to experience when I'm traveling here before I can get back and really work. I have to say that I'm feeling pretty confident about this roof rack. The decision to use the acrylic adhesive glue for the major strength bearing components I think was a good one, because you walk up to this thing and it feels very solid. There are 10 attachment points to the roof, and every single member feels very solid. So I'm pretty confident in this design. This will give you an idea of what the interior ultimately will look like. This is my bed and couch. On this side I've placed the refrigerator, the stove, and the sink just to give a sense of where everything is. The refrigerator is pretty big, and I set it on top of a tray there because I've got a ventilation hole underneath it. The stove will have a propane bottle down underneath here, and in addition I will have a propane fueled heater, a Propex heater that I'll locate under the stove portion there. The sink and the water system are going to present a little bit of a challenge because my water will come from the roof and it'll come down through these holes. They'll be connected together across this length here to the other tube using PVC, or if that doesn't work out, if the bend is too much to put PVC in there, then I'll put in maybe garden hose or PEX. I'm not quite sure. The sink itself will have a Berkey type water filter, and the regular Berkey filters won't fit in this space, and so I purchased from the dollar store a couple of containers which I will put in here. I'll have to cut this portion of the sink to fit it in there, and then in addition I'm going to put a hole in the sink here with a spigot coming out for fresh water, for purified water. And even those didn't fit exactly, so I have to modify those a little bit. The containers don't stack exactly on top of each other. There's not enough room, so I have to nest them a little bit, which is probably not a bad idea, and that will give me flexibility. Now, one of the things associated with the kitchen cabinet is that I want to be able to roll this system out. Now, originally I was going to put in straight rollers down on the bottom just to pull it straight out, but I forgot that I've got a section there that is not going to pull out. It won't clear this. So the rollers, the casters I'm going to have to put in there are going to have to be swivel casters so that I can pull it out a little bit and then pull it out of the van. So I still think that that's going to be a great idea. Ultimately, I'm going to store a long table underneath the bed that I'll be able to pull out, or at least I'll be able to store it underneath there. And then that table will be also my swinging table, my pivot table, my pole table that I'll put inside the van. Now, one of the things that I've decided that I'm going to do is, this is not the final floor by any means. This is just the rough underlayment, but the bed legs I'm going to build extensions. Okay, so I want to be able to vary the height of the bed. So I want to be able to increase it and decrease it. And that will allow me to, for example, fit my microwave oven underneath here. And also it will allow me to compensate for any kind of level adjustments that I have to make. I wanted to show you how easy it is to slide the bed in and out. Because it's aluminum, it's very lightweight, so it's pretty easy to slip this in and out. The mattresses make it a little bit more complicated, but I think it won't be too bad. Now, one thing I want to do is I want to beef up those bed legs a little bit. They feel, although they have plenty of force, in a vertical sense, they probably need some stabilization to make sure that they don't collapse from folding over, etc. So I'll probably be doing some more work on stabilizing that leg system. I wanted to show you that the easiest way to cut this foam for the bed cushions is to use an electric knife. Using the electric knife, you can get very clean, vertical, consistent cuts. As I was thinking about this slat system, it occurred to me that it's probably not a good idea for me to attach the slats directly to the surrounding stationary frame, because then I would be very difficult. I'd have to take out the entire bed in order to get to any important equipment. So I attached the slats in their own frames so that I could lift them up in two sections. One section over the electrical box, the other section over the rest of the bed. And that gives me more flexibility in accessing the stuff underneath. With the bed fully deployed, I'm pretty satisfied that there's quite a bit of room here. It's nearly the size of a twin bed. And I'm hopeful that I can configure the coverings of those cushions so that I can minimize, the effect of that crease in the middle. I've heard that can be a bother, but I'm going to try to figure out a system to not make that a nuisance if possible. The insulation system, what I've decided to do, I'm going to make everything functional before I install any more insulation in here. I want to be able to, I haven't located my upper cabinets yet. I want to actually use the van a little bit before I do that, and then I'll locate those more accurately. And before I install all the insulation, I want to place all of my equipment and make it all functional. I want to make it so that I can remove this material easily, or all of the components in here, so that I can then add in the insulation and then put everything back. I will ultimately skin, the cabinets and the walls and the sofa/bed with duck cloth, and that will be very lightweight, and it is water resistant, so that it will give me a little bit of stain protection, I hope, and allow me to wipe it down and also keep the moisture. It will act as a semi-vapor barrier inside the van. The insulation itself will have a vapor barrier because I'll install it with the shiny side facing the interior and tape all the joints really well. But that's what I've got so far. This is the tray that the refrigerator will sit on. It'll be bolted to that 2-inch strip down the middle there to keep everything solid, and there will be basically nylon straps which go through the handles of the fridge and will wrap around that frame to keep it in place. The frame itself provides a 1-inch frame at the bottom, but then it's got these 2-inch blocks which will elevate the refrigerator up so that I'll have a 2-inch air gap between the hole there where I get ventilation. I'll take out that stopper, and there's a hole there with a screen in it that I'll be able to suck up air from underneath the van to circulate around the refrigerator. Now the electrical system, basically I'll have 3 panels. I'll have one by the stove there. I'll have another on this side, and they're going to be mounted on aluminum strips, which I will mount, but in the place in the cavity of the window there. And then when I put in my insulation, I will create foam board cabinets and shelves around that. One of them is leaking of the actual water pipes, and what I'll do there is I'm going to use what they call Uniseals instead of a bulkhead fitting in order to create the seal between the end cap of the PVC and the PEX or hose or PVC that I'm going to run inside the cabin. The Uniseal, I think, was a great discovery because it allows you to connect PVC to a curved surface similar to a rain barrel, or in my case a curved PVC cap. So that was a great find. One concern I have is actually sloshing of water in my water tubes on the roof. So when those water tubes are about half full, if I brake suddenly, I've got all that water rushing towards the front of the van. The solution to that is to break up the water tubes into sections and separate each one with a coupling, and inside the coupling is a baffle. In other words, it's a round plastic acrylic sheet that I use, and I'll drill a hole in the top of it for air, and then drill a hole in the bottom of it to allow water to flow through it. But if I get sudden surges of water, it will keep those, it'll break up that sloshing to small sections. So, cutting those acrylic sheets was not so easy. I used an angle grinder and a Dremel tool to fine tune it to get it exactly the right diameter to fit inside one of those couplings. And then when I glue all those couplings and the short sections of pipe together, then hopefully I will eliminate that sloshing problem. One of the other challenges I had was actually in connecting my battery isolation manager. And the battery isolation manager requires a connection to the ignition switch. In essence, it needs power whenever the ignition switch is turned on, and it needs to be 0 volts when the ignition switch is turned off. And so I located the fuse box inside the engine compartment where I've got all of my components for the battery isolation manager. And I discovered there's a fuse box there, but there was really no easy way to connect to find a location for the ignition. What I did find was a blower fuse, that operates the fan for the van, and I was able to modify that fuse in order to solder on a lead onto the fuse itself to connect to my battery isolation manager. So I took that 40 amp blower motor fuse and I modified that using my Dremel tool. I cut the plastic away from that stud in order to expose the stud so I could solder on a lead. This is the exposed stud, and this is what it looks like after I've soldered it onto the wire and connected it to my ignition terminal on my isolation manager. It's not pretty, but I think it'll do the job. So that's pretty much it for now. Everything is taking a lot longer than what I think it should take, but I'm having a good time. There are times when I can't find some part locally, so I have to wait for Amazon or some other supplier. I have to wait a few days. It's just going to take a long time to do it. I'm guessing maybe another year before I have this thing completely finished to my satisfaction. And as I said, I'm going to be taking a break here for the next 5 or so weeks, so don't expect to hear anything from me. In the meantime, take care.